Hello, welcome to Regular Achievers Education Unlimited, presenting Royal Tutors, your trusted support for brain-friendly high-impact learning. Today we will be in art, poetry from the Power and Conflict Cluster, and it is My Last Duchess versus Ozymandias. By the end of the tutorial, you should be able to understand the context, key theme and method of both My Last Duchess and Ozymandias, distinguish between personal tyranny, the Duke, and political tyranny, Ozymandias, and analyze how each poet presents power. Construct a grade 9 comparative essay response using the Peter analysis framework. Understand precisely what AQ examiners reward and what separates the grade 9 and grade 7 response. My Last Duchess, context and background. It was written in 1942 by Robert Browning, a Victorian poet known for dramatic monologue. It was based on the Alfonso II, Duke of Ferrara, a real Renaissance nobleman who married or who may have poisoned his wife. It is a dramatic monologue where the Duke addresses a marriage envoy while showing a portrait. Victorian context, which portrays women as properties, and the Duke believes he literally owns his wife. Here, Brownie is not the speaker. He condemns the Duke by letting him reveal his own monstrosity. Historical setting. It is set in Renaissance Italy, allowing Brownie to critique Victorian patriarchal value safely. Now for theme and method, we have personal tyranny, control through jealousy, possessiveness, silencing. We have power and gender. The Duke treats his wife as an object to be owned. Form. It's a dramatic monologue where the Duke unknowingly condemns himself. Iambic pentameter with redeeming couplet suggests the Duke's forced order over everything. And then we have quotes like I gave commands, or they all smiles stopped. Chilling euphemism for murder. The portrait, the Duke controls the Duchess in death as he couldn't in life. Enough for examiners. The Duke never admits to murder. His casual euphemism, I gave commands, is the most chilling moment. The reader sees what he refuses. For Ozymandias, the the context and background, it is written in 1818 by Percy Shelley, a romantic poet, radical political thinker. Ozymandias is inspired by news that the Egyptian statue of Ramesses II was coming to Britain soon. Ozymandias, a Greek name of Ramesses II, one of the ancient Egypt's most powerful pharaohs. It is written as a direct political statement. Shelley opposed tyranny and the power of kings, contextualizes against Napoleon era, a warning to all who seek absolute power. The poem Ozymandias is a sonnet about the decay of all empire. Shelley's radical message hidden in a safe historical form. Now, for the key theme and method, we have the political tyranny, the hubris and ultimate decay of all dictators, power versus time, all empire crumble, arrogance is safe, defend, defending. Then the form is irregular sonnet, traditional power of the form underlines, like Ozymandias itself. Frame narrative, a traveler, speaker, inscription. Distances, Shelley add irony. A look on my work, those are one of the quotes. Ye mighty and despair, supreme irony. Nothing besides remains. Now we have the vast trunkless legs, which indicates visual imagery of power reduced to fragments by time. Now, for examiners, the supreme irony is that Ozymandias boastfully boastful inscription survived, but it was described as nothing. The words, at last, the power tracking it. Now let's see side by side comparison features My Last Duchess and Ozymandias. Type of tyrant, we have the personal tyrant for My Last Duchess and we have the political tyrant for Ozymandias. Then method, or the poet's method, we have dramatic monologue for the poet's method, and we have frame narrative and irony. Now for forms, we have iambic, pentameter, and reading couplet. We'll see the description there. And then for Ozymandias, we have irregular modified sonnet, which is order crumbling like empire. Now for tune, we have composed, menacing, possessive for Ozymandias, and we have ironic, detached, ultimate like for Ozymandias. Type a key image. For My Last Duchess, we have the portrait of the Duchess, which signifies control beyond death. And then we have for Ozymandias, we have shattered statues, which is a colossal wreck, signifying or symbolizing his dream of ambition. Now for the central irony, he thinks he has total control. He exposes his own guilt. Why for Ozymandias? He commanded despair. Now his own work inspires it. Now what endures? The painting endures for Last Duchess, while the desert endures for Ozymandias. For both texts, the both poet has shown power as ultimately self-defeating and corrupt. And then the use of the tyrant's own words to condemn himself. Now for questions and then steps to follow. The question GCSE like questions compare how poet present ideas about power and conflict in My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, and one other poem from the Power and Conflict cluster. Now these are 3 essential steps to follow. Number 1 is to underline the key point. Now note, power and control is one. Now when you're talking about power and control, don't just say who has power, but how they exercise it and what it cost them. And then for step 2, we are to talk about what poem is perfect for comparison, and Ozymandias is perfect. Now for the bold poem, it features powerful men brought low by their own arrogance. Now for step 3, we have a 5 minutes pre-planned writing, You have to plan your language, your form, your structure, the context of both texts. Now write your comparative thesis sentence first. It's your compass for every paragraph. Okay, now let's see framework using Peter for a grade 9 or for a grade 9. Now we have the point, evidence, techniques, effect, and then reflect back. Now for the point, we have, for the question, we have opened with a direct comparison thesis, which we said, and then for example, both Brownie and Shelley present power as ultimately self-defeating, yet while Browning's tyrant destroy an individual, Shelley's collapse under the weight of historical time. That's for your thesis. Then we have evidence. Use short embedded quote for both poem. Never quote more than 8 words. Integrate quote into your sentence. For example, I gave commands. They all smiled, then all smiled, stop. That's Browning. Then we have Schiller, nothing besides remain. All right, let's go for the techniques now. Now name the precise literally or the literary or structural device and explain how it creates meaning. Now, for example, Belling's euphemism gave commands. It is a masterclass in understatement. Why? Shelley's juxtaposition of command and reign is structurally ironic. Now, for effect, what does this create for the reader? Connect the poet's purpose and the historical or political context. Now, you have to concentrate on the reader for the effect. The reader feels the reader feels complicit in overhearing the Duke's casual confession. Now, Browning implicates us in the discomfort. Shelley's reader feels chilled by the implication that all power, including contemporary, will decay. Now, that's for the effect. Now, for the reflect back, relate back rather, compare both poets' approaches explicitly, then offer an alternative interpretation. This is the move that lifts grade 7 to grade 9. For example, where Bellings show tyranny in its moments of violence, Schiller shows it in its aftermath. One might argue Schiller's message is ultimately more terrifying because it is universal. Now let's move to what the examiners reward. They reward perspective and for unconvincing. So your writing has to you have to show your perspective and it must be convincing for a grade 9 to grade 8. Now, they also reward clarity and thoughtfulness. Your writing should be clear and then it should express thoughts. That's when you are going to get a grade 7 to grade 6 when you give just that. Okay, so for our grade 5 to 4, when you explain and do some comparison, you get that grade. Now for grade 3 to 1, when you just simply describe, okay, you get that grade. So I would advise that you practice more on showing perspective and then your analysis should be convincing. All right, let's see a modern response to this question. Compare how poet presents the nature of power and control. Okay, now we have annotated the annotated. So we have for the points we have point, evidence, techniques, and we have explanation and then relate back. So both Brownie and Shelley represent power as a force that ultimately unmasks its own corruption, yet they do so through strikingly different method of self-revelation. Browning's Browning's Duke rather employs chilling euphemism. I gave my commands, then all smile stops together. The casual administrative register of gave command against the irreversible finality of all smile stopped reveals a tyrant so accustomed to absolute power and murder become bureaucratic. By contrast, Shelley deploys supreme irony. That's for for my last Duchess. Therefore, Ozymandias' own inscription, "Look on my words, ye mighty, and despair." Now commands an audience of empty desert. The imperative verb look demands attention, but there is nothing left to see. Where Berling's tyrant destroys a single person through language, Shelley's is destroyed by his own language. One might argue that Shelley's critique is the more devastating precisely because it is universal. Now we have for the blue, we have the technique's name, we have the embedded quote for the yellow, and then the white is effect, comparison, and alternate reading. Now this is a modern response for that. Now let's see for form and structure, which is very important. You give like 2 paragraphs, one having the language and then having the other having a form and structure. Now we have these for form and structure. The formal choice of both poets are themselves argument about the nature of power. Berling's use of regular iambic pentameter and rhythmic couplets, and notably couplet that never feels close because they split into the next line via an enjambment. Structurally, enacts the Duke's obsession with control. He imposed rigid form on everything, yet feeling kept escaping. Shelley, by contrast, uses an irregular sonnet, a form traditionally associated with love and ordered beauty, and deliberately disrupt his rhyme scheme, just as time disrupts empire. The fractured form is the message. No power, however, regards its appears, can resist dissolution. Alternatively, one could argue that Shelley's choice of the sonnet with the association of love is an ironic comment on how tyrants love their own power above all else. Now, why this earn a great night is that the form is argument, and then we have embedded short quote, and then we have alternative reads, and then we have comparative connective. All right, now other poems to compare with my last Duchess and Ozymandias, and you're going to read why on your own. So we have the Prelude, we have London, we have Exposure, we have Storm on the Island, we have Remains, and we have Kamikaze. So I want you to read this and then see why they can be compared to My Last Duchess and Ozymandias. Now look on my words as one of the quotes. Ye mighty and remember. Now note that adapted for Shelley's Ozymandias, remember, the poem's lesson is yours to use. And tied irony in Ozymandias the poet, anti-tyranny political purpose. It uses the dramatic monologue form. The Duke condemns himself through his own voice. And always compare method, not just what the poem says. Alternative interpretation in at least one paragraph gives you grade 9. Then use your form, which is your secret weapon. Both poets use structure to argue, not just decoration. Thank you for watching today's episode. I will see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and comment. Thank you and bye.